Wyoming Territory, 1882. The wind cut sharp through the open basin as Jonah Jessup reined in his horse at the edge of the ridgeline, narrowing his eyes at the sight below. There, staked to a splintering fence post outside the mining town of Dry Creek, a woman stood bound by rope, hair wild, dress torn at the shoulder, and chin lifted like she feared nothing and no one. The crowd around her was already thinning. Most folks had gotten their fill of shouting, and now they left her to the sun and dust. Jonah's jaw tightened. He had come to Dry Creek for supplies, not trouble. But that woman, she looked like trouble carved into flesh and bone, and he could not stop staring. He kicked his horse forward. By the time he reached the edge of the post, the last of the onlookers were wandering off, muttering about too wild for her own good, and should have been run off weeks ago. Jonah dismounted slow, his boots crunching over dry gravel. The woman turned her face toward him, green eyes sharp beneath the smudge of dirt and sweat. She did not beg. She did not flinch. She just stared, breathing hard like she had run miles before they caught her. "You come to gawk too?" she asked, voice hoarse. "No." Jonah pulled a knife from his belt and sliced through the rope at her wrists. "Came to cut you down." She stumbled as her hands came free, but caught herself quick, standing proud again. "You do that for all wild women you find tied to posts?" she asked. Jonah looked her over, her bare feet blistered, her dress torn at the hem, the defiance still burning in her eyes. "No," he said. "Just the ones who look like they could burn a house down with a thought." That got a flicker of a grin from her. "I did not burn a house down," she said. "Just slapped the mayor's son when he cornered me in the store. He squealed like a pig, ran to daddy. Next thing, I was tied up for disturbing the peace." Jonah didn't doubt a word of it. He had seen Dry Creek justice before, sloppy and cruel, especially if you were alone in the world. "What's your name?" he asked. "Vayla Rosemont." "You got anyone here?" "No." Her voice was quiet now. "No one anywhere." Jonah nodded once. "Good. That means no one will miss you when you ride out of here." Vayla blinked. "What?" He reached for her hand, guided her to his horse. "You are coming with me," he said. "My ranch needs someone wild." She stared at him like he had lost his mind. "You do not even know me." "I know enough. You fight back. You stand tall. You do not cry when the whole town's against you." "That is the kind of grit I need more of." Vayla hesitated, her hand hovering near the saddle. "You got a wife back at this ranch of yours?" "No." "Children?" Jonah's face shifted. "Two. But their mother left 3 years ago. They are good kids. They miss her, but they need someone strong around." Vayla looked away for a beat, then back at him. "You do not even know if I am good with children." "You are good with fire. That is close enough." She huffed a laugh. Then, with a shrug, she mounted his horse like she had done it 1,000 times. Jonah climbed up behind her, and they rode out of Dry Creek under the setting sun. The Jessup Ranch sat nestled in a wide bowl of land framed by low hills and cottonwoods. It was not much, 3 cabins, a barn, a corral, and a lot of dust, but it was steady, and it was theirs. Jonah's children, Samara and Sila's, ran out from the barn when they saw the horse. They were 10 and 8, thin and sun-browned, with their father's sharp eyes. "Who's that?" Sila's asked, peering around Jonah's leg. "This is Vayla," Jonah said. "She's going to stay for a while." "Is she mean?" Samara asked. Vayla crouched down, her voice soft. "Only to people who deserve it." Samara grinned. That was good enough. That night they sat around the fire pit outside the main cabin. Vayla had washed, borrowed one of Jonah's shirts, and helped the children set out bread and beans. She sat a little apart at first, watching, but not withdrawing. Jonah poured her tin cup with coffee and passed it to her. "You do not know what you have brought home," she said after a while. "Maybe not," Jonah said. "But I know you did not belong tied to a post like some animal." Vayla's fingers tightened around the cup. They called me wild like it was a curse. Jonah looked at her long and steady. Wild is just what my ranch needs. Vayla did not reply, but her eyes softened. Days passed. Then a week. Vayla never said much about where she had come from, and Jonah never asked more than she would give. But she worked. Hard. She fixed the chicken gate, patched the roof, and taught Samara how to braid rope. She rode fence lines with Jonah and helped Silas gather eggs without breaking half of them. She laughed more. She smiled easier. And every night, Jonah found himself watching her from the porch, wondering when exactly his heart had started beating different. One morning, Jonah found himself standing in the barn doorway, watching Vayla muck out stalls. Her sleeves were rolled up, her cheeks flushed, and her hair tied back in a red cloth. "You want help with that?" he asked. She looked up, one eyebrow raised. "You ever mucked a stall wearing your Sunday shirt?" Jonah looked down, then grinned. "Guess I have not." He stepped in anyway, grabbed a pitchfork. They worked side by side. The silence was easy, the rhythm steady, until Jonah looked over and said quietly, "I meant it, you know." Vayla paused. "Meant what?" "What I said in town, about wild being just what this ranch needs." She looked at him, really looked, and something in her chest shuddered. "I have never belonged anywhere, Jonah. You do now." Vayla's breath caught. That was not a line. It was not a trick. It was just truth, plain and sure. She reached out, brushing dirt off his collar. "I think I want to stay," she whispered. Jonah's hand came up, cupped her cheek. "Then stay." And she did. A slow rain swept across the basin 2 weeks later, softening the dust into clay and chasing the children indoors. Jonah stood under the eaves of the barn, watching the drops fall with his arms folded, boots damp where the puddles lapped at the threshold. Behind him, Vayla's voice drifted low and steady, walking Silas through the careful work of sanding a wooden yoke. She had a quiet way with the boy, never demanding, never overly sweet, just present, patient. Jonah turned toward them. "Silas, go help your sister with kindling. She's likely stacked it all wrong." The boy looked up, hands streaked with grit. "But she'll be halfway through the woodpile by now." Silas huffed, but set the yoke aside and dashed out. Vayla brushed a curl from her cheek with the back of her wrist. "He's got good hands." "Precise." "I know," Jonah said. "He gets that from his mother." She paused, the moment held between them, then let it go without prying. Jonah stepped further into the barn, the scent of damp hay rising from the floor. He leaned against the stall rail, watching her gather the tools. "Why did you come west?" he asked. Vayla set the rasp down carefully. "Because I'd already burned every bridge east of the Mississippi." He waited. "I worked in a boarding house in St. Louis. The owner said I was too proud to keep, and the guests said I talked too much. After that, I cleaned coaches for a livery. The man who ran it, he liked to corner me when the others weren't around, so I left." She picked up a length of leather, ran her thumb along its edge. "Tried Kansas City next. Same story, different names. I didn't belong in dresses or behind counters. I belonged under sky." Jonah nodded once. "You found it." "I did." They stood in the quiet for a while, the rain softening to a mist. A sparrow darted in through the open loft and scattered straw as it flitted from beam to beam. Vayla watched it settle, wings still. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. Jonah's brow creased. "This land's got my children's roots in it, my father's sweat, my own blood too. I can't leave it." She glanced sideways. "That wasn't what I meant." He looked at her then, steady and clear. "No. I don't think about leaving." She nodded once. "Then I won't either." That night, after the children were asleep, Vayla sat cross-legged near the hearth, mending a sleeve. Jonah pulled off his boots and settled into the rocker across from her, nursing a chipped mug of weak coffee. The fire popped low between them. "Did your father raise you?" she asked without looking up. No, Jonah said. He worked the railroads, was gone more than he was home. My ma did most of the raising. Was she kind? She was tired. Vayla tied off a thread and bit it clean. Mine died when I was 12. Fever took her in 3 days. My father drank more after that. Then the law took him. Jonah didn't answer, but his gaze didn't shift. She folded the shirt and laid it aside. You think Samara remembers her mother clearly? She remembers her voice. The way she used to hum when she cooked. Sila's remembers her hands. Vayla's face softened, but she didn't reach for sympathy. You speak plain about it. No use doing otherwise. It's what we've lived. The fire dimmed to coals. Jonah rose and stirred it with the poker, then added a split log. The glow returned, casting gold across Vayla's knees. You sleep all right in the bunkhouse? He asked. I do. You want to move into the main house? Vayla met his eyes, her own unreadable. And what would that mean? That I trust you. That the children do. That it's your home too if you want it. She stood slowly, walked past him to set the folded shirt on the shelf, then turned back. I've never had a home that didn't expect me to change. Jonah crossed the space between them, closed the distance with quiet certainty. I'm not asking you to be anything but who you are, her breath caught. Then yes, I'll move in. He reached up, brushed a bit of ash from her cheek. Neither of them stepped back. By early June, the creek behind the pasture had dropped low enough for the children to cross barefoot without fear of the current sweeping them. Samara spent her afternoons building twig bridges between the rocks, while Silas collected the flattest stones he could find and tried to skip them past the bend. Vayla split her time between the garden rows and the Smith's milk cow on loan for the season, learning the rhythm of milking with a quiet patience that surprised even her. Jonah noticed the change in her gait first, not slower, but settled, like her feet had finally decided the land would hold them. One morning, while the sun was still behind the hill, and the air held a chill that clung even through wool, Jonah found her kneeling by the corner fence, fixing a section of sagging wire with a borrowed hammer and a strip of old leather. She didn't look up when he approached. That fence has been leaning since spring, he said. You've got eyes, Jessup, she replied, but not enough hands. He crouched beside her, setting a hand on the fence post. You could have waited. I was planning to do this tomorrow. I had the time. And the wire was loose. Jonah studied the line of her jaw as she worked, the way her fingers moved with purpose. You've stopped checking behind you. Vayla sat back on her heels. There's nothing chasing me out here. She cut the wire clean and stood, brushing dust from her skirt. But I've noticed something. What's that? You don't laugh easy. Jonah leaned against the post, arms crossed. Not much to laugh at most days. That mean you don't miss it? He tilted his head. I suppose I do, just forgot how. Her gaze didn't soften, but her voice did. You've got 2 children who'd try anything to hear it. Jonah glanced toward the house, where smoke curled soft from the chimney. You think they're missing something? No, I think they're waiting on something. He didn't answer right away. Then, and you? I'm waiting on nothing, she said. I'm here. They walked back together, side by side but without touching, the sky just coloring behind the ridge. That evening, Vayla sat on the porch steps, rubbing a cloth over the scuffed leather of her boots. Jonah brought out a slice of cornbread wrapped in a napkin, still warm from the hearth. Samara said you taught her how to whistle using grass blades. She wouldn't stop until she got a sound out of it, Vayla said. Took her 10 tries. Silas gave up after 3. Jonah handed her the bread. He's more like me than he wants to admit. Vayla took a bite, chewing slowly. You ever think about marrying again? Jonah didn't flinch. Some. You holding out for someone quiet, or someone who sews real straight? I'm not holding out for anything, he said. But if I did, it wouldn't be for quiet. She met his gaze, steady. I don't sew straight. I've noticed. He sat beside her on the step, close enough to feel the heat of her arm. "You think you'd stay," he said, "past the harvest? I might." "What would keep you?" She didn't answer right away. Then, being needed for more than just strong hands. Jonah was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out, not to touch her, but to take the empty cloth and fold it in his lap. "I don't need a hired hand. Not really. I know. I need someone who sees this place and doesn't want to change it. Someone who'll fight for it when it's worth fighting, and let it be when it's not." Vayla looked up at the slope beyond the barn, where the cottonwoods had turned silver in the dusk. "You asking me to stay, Jonah? I'm telling you I want you to." She leaned back on her palms, letting the last light of day fall across her face. "I'll stay," she said. "But not because I owe you or because your children need raising. I wouldn't want you to. I'll stay because I've walked through enough places that never asked me to." Jonah didn't reach for her, didn't rush the moment. He simply nodded, as if it had already been decided in the quiet between them. Inside, the children argued softly over who had hidden the deck of cards. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage from the hills, and Vayla turned her face toward it, breathing deep. Jonah watched her, and for the first time in years, he felt something inside him ease. Not because he'd found someone to fill a space left behind, but because she had claimed her own space and made it hers. The wheatgrass had gone to seed by July, waving pale and high along the southern edge of the pasture. Vayla crouched near the boundary marker with a length of blue-dyed calico in her lap, wrapping it around a bundle of herbs she'd gathered that morning from the shaded slope beyond the bluff. She'd found wild chamomile there, and a patch of golden currant tucked between the rocks. Samara had followed her part way, then turned back when the brush thickened, and Vayla had gone on alone, sure-footed and quiet. Jonah came up the path from the west fence line, his shirt clinging to his back with sweat. He stopped short when he saw her kneeling by the marker rock, fingers tying the bundle with a neat twist of twine. "You planning to sell medicine on the side?" he asked. "Not to anyone in town," she said. "But there's a family half a day north. The mother's got a cough that won't leave. I said I'd come." Jonah wiped his brow. "You sure that's wise? They've got a daughter my age," she said. "I met her once back when I first crossed into this part of the territory. She was the only one who didn't look through me." He leaned a hand on the rock. "You'll take the wagon?" "No," she said. "I'll ride, be back tomorrow if I leave at first light." He looked toward the horizon where heat shimmered off the distant hills. "You tell the children?" "Not yet. I figured I'd wait until after supper." He nodded slowly. "Let me sharpen your hoof knife before you go. That trail's rough." She rose, dusting her hands. "I'll leave it by the barn door." That evening, while Silas and Samara cleaned the supper plates, Jonah stood beside the hearth, arms loose at his sides. Vayla sat on the edge of the table bench, her boot tapping lightly against the floorboards. "You ever think about what makes a place feel like it's yours?" she asked. Jonah crossed to the mantel and lit the oil lamp. "Not in so many words." "I've had roofs," she said. "I've had jobs, coin in my pocket, but none of it ever felt like it stayed with me. This place," she paused. "It holds on." He looked back at her, the lamplight catching in his beard. "That's because you've put yourself into it." She ran a finger along the grain of the wood bench. "I never stayed long enough anywhere else to do that." He stepped forward. "You're staying now." "I am." They didn't speak for a while after that. The wind outside lifted dust from the yard and sent it rolling in soft spirals across the porch. Silas called from the back room, asking where the playing cards had gone, and Samara shushed him. "I'll be careful tomorrow," Vayla said. "I promise." Jonah kept his eyes on her. "I know." She rose and walked past him, pausing at the door. "You ever want me to leave, you'll have to say it plain." "I won't say it." "I know," she said, and stepped out into the dark. The ride north began before the sun crested. Vayla packed only what she needed: blanket roll, water, the herb bundle, and carried her rifle across her saddle. By mid-morning, she'd left the ranch valley behind, rising into the scrub hills where the grass grew thin and the cottonwoods leaned east from years of wind. At midday, she stopped at a dry creek and let the horse breathe, rubbing his flank with cool hands. She drank sparingly, letting most of the canteen water rest for the return. When she reached the homestead, just past a stand of wind-warped juniper, the woman she'd remembered was waiting outside with a shawl drawn tight across her shoulders. Her cough came in bursts, but she smiled when she saw Vayla dismount. "You found us." "I said I would." They sat under the lean-to while Vayla prepared the poultice, her movements sure and unhurried. The daughter brought hot water in a dented kettle. The father nodded once in thanks, but said little. When the sun dipped low, they offered her a place to sleep. She declined gently, mounting again and turning her horse toward the south. The stars had begun to show before she reached the edge of her own land. Jonah was on the porch, lantern lit at his side. He didn't speak when she rode into view, only stepped down as she slid from the saddle, legs stiff. "You made good time," he said. "I didn't want to miss another morning here." He took the reins from her and led the horse toward the corral. "Children are asleep." Vayla leaned against the porch post, watching him in the lantern light. "They ask where I went. They asked when you'd be back." She stepped up onto the porch, her boots quiet against the wood. "I brought back some seed from the bluff. Something we can plant along the edge of the garden. Might take." He tied the horse and came back toward her, his steps slow. "You didn't have to bring anything." "I know," she said. They stood close now, no need for words to fill the space between. Jonah put his hand on the doorframe beside her, his body angled just enough to block the wind. "I've been thinking," he said. "Come autumn, we could build a second room onto the house. Give the children more space," she nodded. "And maybe a root cellar. The ground's soft enough by the far wall." He looked at her, something steady and full in his gaze. "You want to do that together?" "I do." He reached for her hand. This time she let him take it. Their fingers laced easily as though they'd always known how. Inside, the coals in the hearth pulsed low. Outside, the stars wheeled across the sky, and the earth beneath them held firm. The wind shifted in late August, bringing with it the scent of drying grass and the first hints of autumn. Vayla stood near the barn, sleeves rolled to her elbows, sorting through the last bundles of flax she and Samara had harvested from the north patch. The work was slow, hands aching by noon, but she didn't mind the rhythm. It gave her time to think without stirring up the old restlessness that used to turn her feet toward the next road out. Jonah stepped out of the lean-to shed with a length of timber balanced across one shoulder. His gait had grown easier around her, less guarded, like something heavy had been set down for good. When he set the timber near the porch, he turned and caught her eye. "You think we'll have frost early this year?" he asked as he approached. "Feels like it," she said. "The birds are quieter. Trees are losing color from the tips first." He leaned against the fence rail between them. "If it comes early, we'll need to finish the addition before the rains. I was hoping you'd draw the layout." Vayla nodded once. "I can do that. I've still got the charcoal from the bluff stones." Jonah crossed his arms. "I've been meaning to ask you something. Thought I'd wait until the ground felt steady first." She didn't look up. "It's steady now," he exhaled slowly. "I want to give you my name." Vayla's hand stilled over the flax. "You sure?" "I'm not offering out of duty," he said. "I'm offering because this place stopped feeling half empty the day you stepped onto it." She turned to face him fully, eyes steady. "You want a wedding with witnesses and vows." "I want what you want," he said. If that's just you and me and the children by the creek, that's enough." She stepped forward, her fingers brushing his. "Then that's what we'll do." 3 days later, Samara placed a crown of dried yarrow in Vayla's hair while Silas stood tall beside Jonah, holding a straight branch he'd carved smooth and tied with a strip of blue cloth. They met by the creek, the same bend where the children had played all summer. Jonah wore his cleanest shirt, and Vayla had hemmed a skirt from the calico she'd once used to wrap herbs. They spoke their promises plainly, each word meant, each silence full. Afterward, they shared bread and coffee on the porch, the children laughing as they chased a wayward hen through the yard. Jonah reached for Vayla's hand and didn't let go, even as the evening cooled and the stars came out above the hills. In the weeks that followed, the addition took shape. Vayla's layout hung from a nail in the barn, and Jonah followed it without question. Samara painted flowers into the corners of the new room, her brush careful. Silas built a shelf for his books beside the window. One morning, as they worked side by side sawing planks, Vayla looked at Jonah with a quiet intensity. "I never imagined stillness would feel like freedom," she said. He set down the saw and wiped his brow. "Stillness with the right person feels like breath after drowning." Later that night, with the children asleep and the fire banked low, Vayla sat beside him on the porch step. She rested her head against his shoulder and he wrapped an arm around her waist. "I want to teach Samara how to stitch from patterns," she said. "Not just mending, something made from start to finish." "She'd like that," Jonah said. "And Silas wants to try growing something next spring. Said he wants to see if he can get carrots to take. Then we'll show him how." Jonah looked down at her. "You think you'll ever miss drifting?" She shook her head. "I've already found what I was looking for." That winter, snow fell soft across the basin, wrapping the land in stillness. The new room stayed warm through the nights, and the children slept peacefully under quilts Vayla had pieced together from scraps. She kept a small tin in the cupboard for her herbs, but she no longer carried them bundled for the road. Jonah's ledger showed steady hands and full shelves, and each night he fell asleep with Vayla beside him, her breath warm against his back. In the early spring, Vayla planted the golden currant cuttings along the edge of the garden, where they took root and began to leaf. Jonah built her a bench beneath the cottonwoods, and in the evenings they sat there as the sun fell behind the hills, watching the sky go from gold to blue to deep, hush dark. The Jessup ranch held firm, not because of its timber or soil, but because the people within it had chosen to stay. Together, without fear, without pretense, and with a love that came not from grand gestures but from the quiet, daily acts of tending, building, and never turning away. They lived that way, always hands calloused, hearts full, and every night ending with the warmth of the other close by. And they never drifted again.